Welcome back to another dazzling episode of Crusty Car News, and today we have 5 absolutely amazing news stories for you. First news, Ford absolutely shocking announcement. Would you believe it? The CEO is even stepping up. The second story, how did consumers get so poor? Repossessions of cars are literally on the rise. The third story, some breaking news about truck buyers. How are they thinking? And what's the thoughts about buying a new truck? Are the prices extraordinarily high, or are they good enough to buy now? The fourth story is all about my personal tips on how to negotiate with a car dealer so you get your best outcome, get to save some dollars in your hand, and of course to drive your new vehicle in pride. The fifth story, actually I show you how step by step how to find the cheapest vehicles that are on dealer lots right now. Guaranteed you're going to save yourself tens of thousands of dollars. So on that note, be sure to sit down, strap yourself in, grab yourself your favorite beverage, and hold on for the ride. Let's get into it now.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
The first story we'll talk about is Ford's big announcement. That's right, the CEO of Ford is announcing that there's going to be some big changes. Unfortunately, sales are down, inventory's rising, and Ford's having a really tough time. Now, of course, with these EV mandates, some big things are changing, and of course, there's no more incentives for customers to buy those new Ford electric vehicles. Things are falling off the proverbial wagon. Let's find out how. While they had a spike at the end of 2024 due to high incentives, they moved some metal, but the bottom line is prices are going up, inventory is going up, but profits are going down. Things are so devastating, in fact, they make a big announcement and the CEO is taking some hard action.
These kind of tariffs, especially in these two countries, are very significant, and if they persist beyond months, we could see billions and billions of dollars of pressure on the industry, lost jobs, lots of impacts to communities and our ecosystem in the industry. And that's what we're talking to the administration about.
I don't understand the words you just said.
There's already talk about, due to some unforeseen issues as well as some serious headwinds, Ford's anticipating over $2 billion loss in profits for 2025 from what they saw in 23 and 24. And we know those years weren't particularly stellar. Manufacturers like Ford are struggling with some serious headwinds with all kinds of recalls. We know they lead the list of recalls, and they're up there with Stellantis with the number of problems they're trying to solve with bad transmissions, leaking fuel injectors, bad engines, dropping valves. There's a whole plethora of issues that Ford's been dealing with, and the warranty work is going through the roof. That's literally eating their lunch. Consumers are starting to understand with the rising prices that they're out of control and out of reach for a lot of buyers. Many people can't come to terms with trying to spend $80, $90, $100,000 on a half-ton truck. Even the latest Maverick, which was supposed to be a price point vehicle, is now charged. I've seen prices as much as $55,000 for Lariat trim. Absolutely bananas, and a lot of buyers are just not having it. As a result, we're seeing inventories rise. We're seeing profits down as much as 19% last year. That's right, the profits have taken a literal nosedive. 6.1% down just on Thursday alone. Things are not looking good for Ford, and the sales continue to fall.
We can handle a couple weeks of tariffs. If it goes beyond that, obviously it will be billions and billions of incremental headwinds for the company.
From last year, they saw a $10.2 billion profit, and they're almost expecting to see around $7.5 billion this year before interest and taxes. Means that they're seeing a huge amount of loss in terms of their overall profit margins. The profitability of the company is just simply not there. And the worst part is they keep pouring money into the EV market, which is now unfortunately seeing a new set of headwinds with the incoming administration signing off and saying there's no more mandates and there's no more requirement to produce these EVs, at least not for a while. And Ford's got a lot of investment. Now, unfortunately, they know they've lost a lot of money and they're losing cash on the sales and transaction of every sale of the new F-150 Lightning as well as the Mustang Mach-E. Those are proven losers, and while they're trying to get ahead of the game and sell vehicles to anticipate what the market is going to be, which is the full transition to electric vehicles by 2030 or 2035, this latest administration says that's not it and people need to have choice. Now Ford's caught up in the middle. They also expected to have an affordable EV out by 2027, but that's almost too little too late. There's been conversation, and as well as the CEO Farley is claiming that a lot of these foreign markets from Japan and Europe currently are not under the same tariff regime that we're starting to see that may be imposed on both Canada and Mexico, which directly will have a major impact on Ford's outcome. That's right, they're anticipating some significant losses, at least in the first quarter to first half of 2025, because the release of the brand new Lincoln Navigator and the Ford Expedition SUVs. Again, two more massive SUVs with high levels of trim, high levels of luxury amenities, and all kinds of luxury appointments. This means one thing: less affordable for the buyer.
What do we have here? There's a whole host of parts and pieces, and you can see it's got a lift kit, big boots. It's got much more performance. I mean, if you look at it here, they do say 775 horsepower. So you get the performance, the lift kit. Yeah, it's a nice truck. But 190.
So here we go again, the conversation that we've been having for the last 3 or 4 years is, where are all the affordable vehicles going? They've gotten rid of all their cars. Ford no longer sells a car. They're also getting rid of the Escape, which was a relatively affordable SUV. And all that they're trying to do is sell more of those premium vehicles like every other OEM out there. Stellantis got burned hard at the end of 2023 and 24, realizing that they couldn't move any inventory. And lot rot was getting real because they couldn't sell a lot of the products, which sat for 2 or 3 birthdays.
Are clearly going to be much harder to sell. We're looking at a fully stretched out F350. As we'll notice, this is a Platinum edition, and he features the 6.7 liter turbo diesel. How much is this vehicle? Well, it comes at a significant cost. How about $125,000, 540 bucks?
And what a lot of Ford dealers now are starting to realize again with floor plan costs as they start to rise again, because of with increasing levels of inventory, it just means more cost to each and every dealer. And with the expected outcome of 2024 to look drastically different than 2 or 3 years ago, clearly a lot of buyers just don't have the money and aren't interested in spending $90,000 for a half-ton truck. With that said, Jim Farley, the CEO, is saying there's a couple of key focal areas that they're trying to focus on. One is slightly scaling back the output of a lot of these electric vehicles, knowing full well that only the way they can sell an F-150 Lightning or a Mustang Mach-E is with massive and extreme incentives. And even then, they're losing tens of thousands of dollars on every transaction. And again, we're still 2 to 3 years away from selling that $30,000 EV. Also, a heavy focus by the CEO is also on local dealers and the network, as well as management and the VPs, to say, look, we need a much stronger focus on quality. We've got to get back to where we're not spending so much money on warranty work, so much money on recalls, because that is literally eating their lunch. And there's so many recalls that are outstanding that it's enough to choke a horse. On top of all of this, Ford is getting very worried with the fact that the mandate has been lifted, as well as that federal tax incentive that was going out to the sale and the purchase of every new electric vehicle. That's right, a lot of people were taking advantage of the $7,500 tax credit that would go to the purchase of every new EV as a tertiary incentive for buyers to buy these vehicles. Now, with no more government incentives, as well as the fact that Ford can't trim too much more off these EVs without taking and literally losing their shirts, the prices don't seem to be dropping anytime soon. Plus the fact that no longer is there a mandate, people don't feel as compelled to push forward and buy these EVs. That leaves Ford extremely worried about their plug-in electric vehicles and what the future has in store. They don't want to continue pouring money down there on investment and sales when they're losing money, especially when the federal government isn't necessarily supporting it.
The Mavericks, the Rangers, even base trim level F-150s, and then other dealers are trying to take a long shot, a Hail Mary, and hope that they can sell these high trim level vehicles like these Harley Davidson full-size trucks here with jacked up all kinds of decals, logos, large wheels, lift kits. I can't imagine how many people you're going to probably sell these vehicles to. What does the market look like? We hear the cost of living crisis is eating people alive, and yet we're seeing big inventory of vehicles like these Harley Davidsons piling up on lots. Who's buying these vehicles? Sure, they look great.
So unfortunately, when I walk the lot and I see $80,000, $90,000 for a Lariat F-150, or if I go over and I see a 3500 with the diesel engine and it's costing me $130,000, I'm thinking, who's buying these vehicles? I mean, who can afford this? And where do these manufacturers come off suggesting that we as consumers have a part to play in the manufacturing and buying of a lot of this product when in fact it's just simply not attainable for most buyers. It's out of control. The cost of these vehicles is way beyond what the average middle-class buyer is looking for. And Farley is highly incentivizing the profitability to a lot of the management by saying we need to improve these numbers, and the target for 2025 currently is to at least remove by $1 billion, at least to move the needle in the right direction and try to remove the amount of failures, try to improve on reliability, try to improve on the lack of recalls, as well as remember a couple of years back where Farley effectively halted all the F-150 Lightnings at the port and prevented them to get to the dealerships until a certain quality issue was taken care of. You know, they've got the three major divisions, the commercial, the Blue Oval, as well as the E division. They're actually predicting the E division to lose as much as $5.5 billion this year. Even though they saw a slight spike at the end of 24, the fact remains is the sales and the losses of each sale means that Ford continues this downward spiral on profit losses in their EV segment. And even their Ford Blue, so that's your standard conventional internal combustion vehicles, plug-in hybrids, the vehicles that most buyers are typically buying, has been their mainstream. That's their meat and potatoes. And even that department, and we see a lot of F-150s driving around there. We see a lot of vehicles out on the road, new F-150s, new small hybrids, you know, the new Broncos, even the Mavericks. All of those standard vehicles, whether they're plug-in hybrids or ICEs, inclusively are proposed to see a decline in overall sales from about $5.3 billion last year, could go as low as $3.5 billion this year. Huge losses in the sales of every one of their internal combustion trucks. Not all is well in Fordland, and a lot of it has to do with profitability. Invested too much in EVs, a lot of the incentives are going away, less people likely to buy, and of course Ford will be also less motivated to keep pushing the product line. You also have a lot of the F-150s, they're priced too high, and you just have less buyers. It's that simple. I don't have the money. Most of you don't have the money. And if you're buying a F-150 and you're signing on the dotted line today, consider yourself lucky because you're probably in the top 2%. Most people just can't honestly come to terms and grip with spending that kind of money on a brand new F-150. I just can't believe it. 2025 could be a really rough year for Ford. Until we figure out exactly what the current administration's going to do, things are sort of in the air. The second story is about how consumers got so poor. How did this happen so quickly? How did we go from 2019, where people had money, they were buying cars and toys and TVs, to now where people can barely afford to eat? What's going on? Repossessions are grossly out of control, as well as credit card debt, and things are getting out of hand. We want to explain that right now. Car repossessions are blasting through the roof. But it's not just car repossessions, it's just not car payments, because we know the prices have been extraordinarily high. But a lot of times people are making car payments with their credit cards. Sometimes people are paying other debt with their credit cards. Sometimes people are paying their student loans off with their credit cards. Sometimes they're going into Hawk, buying Christmas presents, buying those gifts from Amazon, going out to even eat now. Many people are going into debt just buying food to put on the table to eat. That's right, with their credit cards. And people are lending money or borrowing money at a rate that realistically many people either can't afford to or shouldn't. But sadly, we're at a place now where the cost of living crisis is pushing people to actually do that. On top of it, we're seeing the 23% increase in repossessions of new vehicles. On top of it as well, people that are using their credit cards often are finding themselves unable to pay it back in due time. And credit cards can represent a great way to build credit, and certainly a convenience factor. It also helps you dispute any challenges, any charges, as well as it's nice to have for travel. But people that often carry credit card debt month over month find themselves in a pickle. How did we get to a place where we're paying 40% more for the same vehicle in 4 years? It's clearly more than just a cost, a sum of all these little costs. There's more going on behind the scenes, and a lot of these OEMs fail to admit that either A, they're charging people too much and increasing their profits way out of proportion, or B, they just don't have a great business model and can't afford to operate in today's climate. And it's probably a little bit of both. But sadly, it's the consumers that are struggling with this greedflation, with the high cost of living, unfortunately with credit card debt, mortgage, loan debts for your cars. Everything is getting out of control.
What kind of numbers are we dealing with here? How bad can it possibly be? Well, according to Philadelphia Federal Reserve, they analyzed the numbers, then found the number of people paying only the minimum payments on their credit card has jumped to a 12-year high. We haven't seen it this bad in over a dozen years. In fact, by the third quarter of 2024, it indicated that 10.75% of the credit card holders were only making those minimum payments, clearly not enough to get by. Where does this end? How do you ever get ahead? Sadly, the 30-day delinquency rates have gone up too, up to about 3.5%, which is virtually double of what it was back in 2021, which ironically and honestly enough was at one of its all-time lows. But we've never seen these numbers like we have today. So the trends are constantly on the upswing of people running out of time, running out of money, and can't afford to pay their debt. Now, according to a report that was completed by the Consumer Financial Protection Board, they found some very intriguing information related to some of this debt. Back in December of 2022, approximately 0.75% of all loans were headed to collections. And that's up about 22.5% since December of 2019. Well, we can all admit that a lot of these OEMs were talking about something we'd like to consider as greedflation, that they were charging just because they could. They were often giving up a lot of those lower cost cars. We've seen a lot of the vendors, Jeep, Ram, Dodge, they started discontinuing the lower cost price point vehicles. Even Ford got rid of their cars. GM got rid of their cars this year. And a lot of manufacturers realized that they were making more money on higher trim level vehicles. That's why the supply chain issues didn't become such an issue, because all they did was they rationed chips and put them into the higher trim level vehicles, sold fewer vehicles, but for a much higher margin. Getting your vehicle repossessed is never a good scene. It's not good for, your own personal well-being. It's certainly not good for your credit score. A lot of people, pride takes a hit. And you know what? We know in a world with, mental health concerns and all of the challenges around, we don't need more stressors. But unfortunately, sadly, so many people get themselves in this predicament. My recommendation, if you're all buying a car and you want to avoid these kind of scenarios, there's a couple of key ways to do that. Number one, don't buy. Okay, that's ultimately the best. Abstinence, I guess, is what they say. But I mean, in many cases, people need a new vehicle, or their old vehicle finally is worn out and gave up the ghost, or maybe it's just no longer fixing, which coincidentally is one of the best tactics. It's fix what you've got. Put in the small repairs to keep those older vehicles on the road until you have a little bit of money saved, at which point then you could put a larger down payment, because that takes to the other aspect. One of the other strategies is having a larger down payment and shortening up your loan term. That does two things. Number one, it gets you out of that loan quicker. Number two, it reduces your overall payment by having that bigger down payment. And number three, well, let's just face it, it's just a win-win, less stress all along the way. Just makes ownership a lot easier. So that's seriously how you need to handle this. You need to have a much bigger down payment, something that looks more like that 10 to 20 to 25%, or even more ideally. If you had cash, that's ideal. Never go to the dealership telling them you have cash. Sign on the dotted line only if you could do an early buyout without a penalty. But naturally, the idea is to go in there with the biggest down payment possible. And especially that also saves you those interest charges, but it also shortens up your loan term if you don't have the full amount. This is just some of the strategy, honestly. Larger down payment, shorter loan term, and find yourself a lower cost vehicle. Do you need that $80,000 truck? Maybe get the base trim model for a while. You know what? If we can't afford it, you can't afford it. See, I know we're in a world and we're in a society where we feel that we've earned it and it's justified and it's vindicated that we can go out and buy whatever we want because we work hard. But why put yourself in that stress? Why put yourself up against that? Why not do something that's more comfortable, where you can take a breather? You don't have to spend as much, but you're still getting the same job done. Instead of spending that $85,000 Lariat, why don't you get that base trim with the 2.7 liter Turbo 6 by Ford? Get that base model, maybe an STX, still gets the job done, 4x4 crew cab, but you can get that for $55,000 instead of $85,000. You've trimmed your payments down by almost a half. So there's great ways around this. Live within your means. That's ultimately the message here. Live within your means. And that goes for credit card debt. Student loan is tough because you're just trying to advance your career. But most importantly, car loans. That's where so many people are getting snookered. We're seeing the repossessions rise.
That's right, we're all feeling the pinch. I'm just like you guys. We all feel like we could use a few extra dollars. And unfortunately, things are looking a little rough around the edges financially. So we'll have to wait and see how things shape up. 2025 could be an interesting year. The third story is we talk about shocking news about truck buyers. What are the thoughts? What's going on in the truck market? It's quite out of control. The prices have gone up 30, 40, 50% in such a short period of time, and yet people are buying. What are they thinking? But wait a minute. There are some buyers that are doing something totally different. I'm going to explain.
What we've seen here in the last few years is the quality is going down to the toilet. And unfortunately, people are making a decision, well, fortunately in some regards, but unfortunately prices have gone up. I mean, we've seen Toyota, of course, they've been having some serious struggles with their new 3.5 or 3.4 liter V6. We've seen GM now, the latest is 877,000 engines potentially at risk now for rod bearing problems with the L87. You know, Ford has been having problems with all sorts of engine issues, dropping valves on some of their EcoBoost engines in their pickup trucks, as well as their full-size Broncos. Issues to the point where now they're creating smaller trucks too, like the Maverick, just because people can't afford the high prices that have been going round and around and around. Okay, where does that leave then the likes of Ram? Well, we know Ram, we're all sneaky in the last 3 or 4 years. You know, they tried to get on the wagon when there were shortages back in 21, and they thought that they would sell a lot of products, premium trim level products, to the consumer when there was nothing else available. So they started jacking their prices up, saying, look, we're a premium brand, we're luxury, so we're going to sell something to the consumer at a premium dollar. And you know, the awkward part was a lot of buyers were buying that. A lot of people were, for a couple of years, buying some of these products. But Stellantis doubled down and they started doubling down, tripling down on the number of output, the vehicles they put out the lots. And then they ultimately left them in a very vulnerable position. A lot of extra inventory laying around. Of course, that coincided with the fact that prices had gone up about 35 to 40% in 2 or 3 short years. It meant that customers all of a sudden started getting pushed out of the market. You know, in the very beginning with chip shortages, people were just eager to get out there and get something in their hands. But realistically, they started to lose touch with the pricing on a lot of these vehicles. And it didn't matter. You know, started income came around. They were one of the worst for, you know, jacking prices up. Chevy started to nudge their prices up. So did Ford. And they all got on this wagon of charging consumers more and more money. The point is, when you do that search on Car Gurus to try to find some older inventory that's still sitting around, 23s, 22s, there's one thing that really stands out to me. There's a very, very small amount of inventory out there of Toyota Tundras, a very small inventory level of GMC pickup trucks or Chevys, and a small inventory of Fords. And that would totally coincide with the fact that we know that GM and Ford had massive sales this year. How can that happen when prices are so high? It's still puzzling, and that's, I think, a big part of the problem, why these prices are still so damn high. And a lot of consumers looking for a new truck or a car are just disheartened. And just the sale, they've got the wind pulled right out of their sails because they can't afford to buy a new truck, because others who may be just within that market are still buying at these overinflated prices. Okay, in some cases it took a lot of incentives, and the fourth quarter of 2024 was very telling because that's where the majority of the sales came from. We saw a lot of sales increases at the last quarter where a lot of them really pushed hard to get people to buy up the 23, 24 inventory as the 25s were rolling in, and people were buying them. People were succumbing to a lot of these big sales, these discounts, you know, discounts on interest rates, discounts on base pricing. You know, there was a lot of incentives flying around. And so for some reason, you know, GM and Ford managed to sell a lot of material. They sold, you know, moved a lot of metal, and they had some big success. I mean, these vehicles are not getting any cheaper. I mean, you look around, I show you every single day, you know, a Lariat for $90,000, $95,000 Canadian. You know, we've seen lots of half-ton trucks over $100,000. I show it doesn't matter if it's a Ford or it's a GM. $100,000 is kind of where you're expecting to get into something with, a little bit of higher level trim levels. And realistically, that's what a lot of these dealers were putting out. They didn't want to put out the cheap vehicles. They didn't want to put out something that was, more basic and more economical. But see, Ram decided that they're going to get rid of the Classic because there wasn't the profits in it. And so they decided that we're just going to push that to the side. People are still buying the higher trim levels. And honestly, a lot of these dealers don't seem to care whether they can sell a truck to everybody. They actually don't care. It's been pretty clear, and they've communicated that quite profusely during the last 4 years, that they don't care to sell a truck to everybody. They just need to produce as many trucks as they can and have somebody buy that inventory. So it just means that market is shrinking, but as long as they're selling and moving metal and, they're selling all the inventory that they need to and keeping the production facilities moving, maximizing profits, that's all they care about. So they don't need to sell as many high volume vehicles that have smaller margins. Rather, they are always good about selling these premium vehicles. That's why you're seeing a lot of these jacked up prices. When you look on Car Gurus, and I've shared with that, you can't actually find the odd cheap truck. You can find some old classics, tradesmen's. You can find a rear-wheel drive crew cab, four-wheel drive crew cab for reasonable money, rubber floors and crank windows pretty much. Some of that does exist out there, but it's few and far between. And usually the ones that are sitting around are really, it's the wrong color. It's a white with a steel rim. And quite frankly, not everybody wants to drive around with a vehicle that looks like a commercial vehicle. So it's thin pickings, to be honest, to get a proper selection choice. What if you want a red Classic, okay, as an example? Harder and harder to come by. They stopped production. They essentially turned off the taps on the manufacturing on the Classics and said, yeah, we're good. We're going to start selling a lot of the premium vehicles. And that was going on for a while. But see, that's where it becomes insulting to the buyer, like you and I, and Lunchbox Joe, who just wants a decent vehicle for a decent price that's going to last. And what it's causing now is this false sense of we're getting a deal, but even though they might knock $7,000 or $6,000 off of that price of that vehicle, what a lot of people fail to see is that they've jacked up $30,000, $35,000 in 4 years. So they put up $30,000 and they'll trim it down for $6,000. And now all of a sudden we feel good about what we just bought. See, it's the old Amazon special. Just before Black Friday shows up, prices go up the week before. They jack all the prices up. So then 2 days before Black Friday, all of a sudden they drop it down by 20% and say, hey, look, the reset, it's down by 20%. So this is what's happening in the truck industry. And they're trying to make us believe that they're doing us a big favor, but they're not. And a lot of people, well, unfortunately, a lot of people are contributing to this problem. And I've been saying this for some time. Stop buying these trucks at these high prices, these inflated prices. I mean, we're here to advocate for buying vehicles. I mean, we need to buy vehicles. It's a consumable, and at some point, at some level, we need to buy a vehicle. It doesn't matter if you're buying US and Canada. A lot of these countries, we're spread out. We need to use our vehicle for work and for play. But there's a time and there's a way we need to approach this. And unfortunately, a lot of these dealers at the GM, particularly Chevy and Ford, they're not quite as negotiable. And they're trying to leave us with the impression that they're giving us a big discount, but it's really not a big discount. Ram seems to be a little bit hungrier these days. And now what we're starting to see is a bit of a shift. Ram's starting to move a little more metal now with the latest CEO getting bumped. And now we see Tim Kuniskis back in the seat. He looks to be taking Ram by the charge and trying to say, look, we may even bring back a V8, and certainly there may be some better options in the upcoming future. They're pushing back the EVs for Rams, and there may be some great options coming up in the Ram fold. Maybe we can get back to a great V8. Maybe we don't have to worry about the EVs coming down the chute for a full-size truck. Regardless, suffice it to say, the big three are in cahoots, and we all know about the chicken tax. See, the chicken tax was imposed years ago, and that was to protect the big three from foreign competition. So what we have is a perfect storm right now in this market, and unfortunately, the perfect storm is one in which the foreign markets aren't allowed to enter our market. Not really. Even products like Toyota are primarily built in North America. So it's built by Canadian or US workers or Mexican workers. And so a lot of the products are even built here and manufactured domestically. And so it qualifies as a domestic product. Therefore, they're able to opt out of some of these features like the chicken tax. So the chicken tax was there to keep some of those foreign, primarily built in European or Asian markets that were a better product than the North American vehicles were making, but they weren't taxed to the hilt. See, the chicken tax would tax those foreign products so that there was no need to they wouldn't even try to compete. They couldn't compete. So it was essentially protecting the substandard qualities that we're starting to see in a lot of these big three.
So I don't know if you're buying a new truck, if you're shopping around, there are some great deals, and I'm going to share that later in the video. But on top of it, if you're one of those folks that just like to keep your old jalopy going like I am, hey, you can do that too. That's another great solution. But if you want new, I'm going to show you how. If you want old, you know what? We know how to fix it. DIY, and YouTube's a beautiful place. My tips, insider tricks. I've been in the car industry for dozens of years, and I want to share some of my findings, some of my learnings, and some of my personal experiences on how to get the best car buying deal possible. Nobody wants to get hosed, and these dealers are like sharks in bloody water. You definitely want to learn all the tricks to avoid getting rooked. It's a skill, it's a tactic you need to have today to save money. A lot of these dealerships, they've been doing this a long time. Their salespeople are quite often very skilled, they're trained, and they know exactly how to pull the rug out from under you. And not only that, I too have got that level of experience. I've been in the car industry a long time. I'm helping friends and family. I just want to cut to the chase. I've got 5 major simple tactics that you probably want to follow, and I'm going to break this down for you because we all need a break. With these car prices absolutely horrendous the way they've been in this last 3 or 4 years, everybody needs a little bit extra insider tips. You're thinking about that next car that you're looking at buying, or that SUV or that truck. I've got into dealerships recently and they still try to play games. It's unbelievable. I went in and looked at a new 4Runner. It was the outgoing 4-liter, and I said, how much? And they said, well, we don't have one on the lot, but if we can find one, we're probably going to charge you $8,000-$10,000 above sticker just because they're rare. They're hard to come by. Well, I wasn't buying that, and I called them out and I walked out. I said, you know what, when you're ready to talk, we'll talk. Nobody's paying over sticker these days. It's simply not worth it. But let's take this one from the top. So the first is preparing for the negotiation. Knowing your budget. We all need to have a budget, but ideally it's a dollar amount. See, too many people get locked into the idea of, how much can I spend each and every month? And see, unfortunately, a lot of people do a monthly budget and that's how they just simply get by. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily the best tactic. Ideally, you know how much your ultimate dollar is, how much you want to spend on that car. $30,000, $50,000, $70,000. Whatever that budget is, ideally that's what you want to target, and you want to target how long you want to hold on to that. So if you're selecting a longer loan term, say a 7, 8, 9 year loan term, even 5 or 6 years, you're probably going to be underwater for the first 2 or 3 years, especially on most North American products. Definitely on a lot of EVs, you're going to be underwater. In other words, negative equity. In other words, you're going to owe more to the bank for the first 2 or 3 or 4 years than the vehicle is actually worth. So if you were to have to flip it or trade it in, you're going to lose money. Don't want to put yourself in that predicament. So ideally, you put more money down, and you certainly want to be able to have some money or good trade-in quality that's going to command a top dollar. Or, of course, you just have to think about what that monthly budget is, or, in fact, more importantly, what that lump sum budget is. Because ultimately, you dictate then those terms, ideally. So if you know how much you want to spend, say $40,000, know exactly how much you have to spend. Do you have 40 grand to spend over 3 years, 4 years? Well, then we can break that down based on current interest rates. So the first thing is knowing your budget. The second point to that is researching the car's fair market value. Never ever pay market adjustment fees. That's the biggest ripoff. But again, know what the fair market value is and go below that, because a lot of these asking prices, car gurus are going to share what a lot of dealers are asking. That's never the final pricing, of course, a lot of these vehicles. This is the asking price. Asking price usually is around sticker or thereabouts, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. And you want to target below that. You want to be between invoice and sticker, which invoice is usually, in that 5 to 10% below sticker price. So you want to be targeting in that range, ideally. And so if they're asking $45,000, I'd be looking at coming in there at, say, at least $38,000, $39,000 as a starting point, and hopefully finishing in that $38,000, $39,000, $41,000, as opposed to that $45,000. You always want to be targeting significantly below. Determine as well as the non-negotiables, the things that you need to have. Do you need to have 4-wheel drive? Do you have a truck? You're looking for a truck. Does it need to be 4-wheel drive? That's a must-have. Does it need to have the crew cab?
If that's a must-have because you've got a growing family, check off the box. Do you need to have the sunroof and leather? Maybe not. So that's not a non-negotiable. So make sure that you know fundamentally what you want and don't be talked into upgrading. See, that's the understanding. You said non-negotiables. Don't let those dealers, once you're ready to step into the negotiations, that you're not letting them talk you into some features that you don't want. Likely, don't look at them talking you into a lower trim level, something that isn't really up to meeting the criteria. Have your criteria, know what the proper colors you're looking for, the trim level you're looking. Not everybody wants the TRX. Maybe some are okay with the lower trim level. Maybe an XLT will work. Looking for the right dealership. It's not hard to start searching. You can do the dealerships in your area if you want to start shopping around. Maybe there's a bad reputation. Go on Yelp. Go on a lot of those Google searches, and you can find out reviews by buyers. And there's always anomalies. There's always that person that has that they got hard feelings and they clearly don't have a lot good to say about a particular dealership. But sift through the highs and sift through the lows. Look at the average. If the average is 4-star and there's a lot of general positive comments, that's probably a good place to start. But ideally, be polite, be courteous. They're all people trying to earn a living, just like you and I, at the end of the day. So be polite. You know, like the old adage says, you probably catch more bees with honey. I like to believe in that. I don't want to come off as the jerk. I want to talk to them person to person and certainly use that as a tactic. The other thing you want to deal when you're negotiating, starting through that negotiation, they're going to ask you some key ingredients. You know, are you financing in-house? Are you planning on leasing? Do you have a trade-in? Those are key tactics, and they're going to use all of those tactics against you. Because if you have a trade-in, then they know they've got some buffer. They can hose you on the trade-in value, or they can negotiate a little bit better. If you're coming in sharpening your pencils, they can allow for that to get you in the door, knowing that they can rip you off on your trade-in. They've got some leeway there. But if they don't know you have a trade-in and they don't know that you're taking the in-house financing, because remember, the in-house financing is a factor that you can utilize too for profits. If they know that they don't have much in the price of the vehicle, but they know they've got you on, in-house financing, then they know they may have you potentially on the deal and they can make some money right there. If they're using in-housing financing, then they're using interest rates to their advantage for the long haul. When you're negotiating, don't tell them about financing or leasing or trade-ins. Say, I haven't really decided. I want to deal on the car first. Always deal on the price of that truck, SUV, or car. Always, always, always before exposing your cards, because that's negotiating tactics. Always chisel them on the price of the vehicle. And a lot of them won't want a deal like that. I get it. But you've got to find the dealers that are willing to talk and negotiate, because realistically, that is a bargaining chip for them. They want to understand how much they can screw you on the front end with trade-ins, with interest rates on a lease or a loan. So they want to have that information first. And so don't tell them that. Don't. Negotiate on the price of the vehicle first. You have to be willing to walk away. Period. Plain and simple. And too many people they get desperate. They see that flashy new car and they get excited like Jojo the circus boy. And they realize, you know what? No, I need to have that car. And they get excited. And the dealers, they look at you and they're like, wow. And they just look, and you've got that glossed over look as you just, with love in your eyes and bulge in the pants. And they know that this person is super desperate and they want this vehicle and they're willing to pay at all costs. So this is something you don't want to get snookered by. Never ever show your emotions, and certainly be willing to walk away. Always be willing to walk away. If you feel like you're getting hosed on the deal, be willing to walk away. It's a must-do. It's a mandatory. Don't tell them what your budget is. They're going to say, well, how much do you have to spend per month? Big mistake, everybody. Never, ever tell them what your budget is. They're going to ask you, well, how much can you spend a month? Oh, I can spend $800. Wrong. Never, ever tell them how much you can spend. They're always going to ask you, too, well, what else have you looked at? The research that you need to do upfront beforehand gets you two positions, a position of strength. Number one is not just, okay, you want this make and model and trim level, but they will, and they have quite often asked me, what other vehicles have you been looking at? And they'll ask you very candidly. And that's why I always do the research. Say, for example, I looked at a Volkswagen Tiguan. Great. Well, what else have you looked at? Well, actually, we've looked at a couple of other vehicles. We've looked at the Mazda CX-50, and we've also looked at the, you could throw another name out there, like Toyota Highlander, for example, or the Toyota RAV4. And you could say, look, I've looked at these are the 3 vehicles I'm looking at. But don't necessarily say that you looked at them yet. Say you're going to have a look at, say you looked at maybe the Honda CRV, but you're going to look at the Toyota and you're going to go look at the Mazda right away. We still have to deal with them. That way it puts you in a position of power because it says to them that there's some quality vehicles that you still haven't looked at yet. And you use the more reputable vehicles. So if you're looking at a Volkswagen today, you still have to look at the Mazdas and the Toyotas. And everybody knows those are reliable cars, right? So use that bargaining chip. You don't have to say they're quality cars. Everybody knows it in the business. So say, yeah, I have to still look at the Toyota. I've looked at the Honda. I love it. I just want to see what Volkswagen had to offer. So you try to drop it like that. You don't say you love the Honda. You don't say you hate it. You say, yeah, I looked at the Honda. I'm going to go look at the Toyota and the Mazda, but I want to see what Volkswagen had to offer. So that's why we're here. So that's how you want to come at it. You always have some other options. It gets you the option of, say, an option of strength. So they want to stop you there. They don't want you to go shopping somewhere else. So this is what I've learned very, very quickly in some times in negotiations. Make sure that you have somewhere else to go because it makes them hungrier to make a deal now. They don't want you to leave because if you leave, you might buy something else. But it also puts you in a position of, it allows you out the door. So if you need time to even think about it, maybe you do like that car that you're shopping for. Maybe you do like that Volkswagen. It allows you the buyout. It allows you to say, look, we're going to go think about it. We want to give it some time. We'll get back to you. Well, I hope that helped. Some of those tips guide you in the right direction. You'll go in there guaranteed you're going to save yourself a pile of money. The 5th story, let's get right to it. I'm going to show you exactly where to find some of those cheap vehicles on the market. There are some trucks, cars, SUVs. It's as simple as a couple of quick keystrokes and you can browse at your heart's content. You don't even have to deal with those greasy car salespeople. I'm going to walk you through how I find some of the best deals that are currently on the market today. There's some real gems out there, brand new trucks, 0 miles, and I found some great deals. Because what do we have here? We have our viewer, Bradley Lawless, as you see right there, is asking, okay, what about brand new vehicles that maybe have 0 miles, but they've a few years old already, maybe they haven't sold? Where can we find those? Because obviously there's going to be deals. You betcha there's going to be deals on some of those trucks, and lot rots are concerned. You've got to be thinking about that. But you can address some of those items, and not only that, you can also consider how much you get deducted. How much will that compensate for, a set of tires in a few short years, maybe a new battery, and get the dealer maybe to throw in a quick oil service or something. But you can get some amazing deals if you just shop around, because now, would you believe it, there's actually, I'm finding 2022s, 23 still out on the lot. I mean, we've got 25s showing up and they're not selling. A lot of these dealers cannot sell those trucks. So let's just break this down. I've pulled up this search on Car Gurus. I've taken a look. So let me show you what I've done. Okay, so I go to Car Gurus, brand new search. I look under all makes because maybe I don't care, or maybe you do. Maybe you want a Ford or a Dodge, whatever, or a Ram. I picked a area code. You know your own, 90210, I did mine. And of course, you can set all your search criteria, how far from that search area you want to be. And I go down and I want to shop for every type of truck. Then I open up the body style and pickup truck. I select that, and then it gives me everything that's within that vicinity. Now I can change that range, how far I want to look. Maybe I'm willing to drive across state for it. Maybe I want to put another, maybe not 50 miles. Maybe I want to go up to say 100 miles. And okay, now we've got more search available. So let's take a look. I also did do a change here. I sorted by the highest first, okay, so the highest price. So I want to start with the premium vehicles first. You scroll down, of course you're gonna have the big dollar Laramies and the big jacked up diesels, and you're gonna pay a lot for those trucks, but that's kind of pointless. I mean, just look at some of these other ones. Maybe for some reason you want yourself a Lightning, F-150 Lightning. Not many people do these days unless incentivized, but look, 92 grand. You can get it now for 80,000, and that's without even bargaining. That's their listed price now because they've come down that far. They're not selling. But we'll break into this here. We'll find you some great deals here. And as we scroll down, I actually did a quick look here first, and there are some amazing deals. 67, so $10,000 off here. It's a 23. It's that new GMC Sierra 1500 Denali Crew Cab. It's the 3-liter diesel. If that's what you're looking for, $10,000 off. See right there. It's a 23. Okay, so it's a year and a half old now. It's going on 2 years. But yeah, I mean, you can get $10,000 off, and if you go in there and you sharpen your pencils, you'll get a lot more. I guarantee. I wouldn't go in there without getting, you know, that carved down to at least $62,000, $63,000, and almost guarantee they're going to take that. So let's take a look. Let's flip to the next page, because I saw a really interesting one here that's a pretty substantial discount, and not all of them are great deals. I mean, let's be honest. Some of them are rip-offs, and we see that. Oh, look at this. Look at this. Here's a great one. $395, you get the 5.7 Hemi. It's a 23 Ram 1500 Rebel 4-wheel drive. $20,000 off. Let's go click into that and see what we're getting out of this deal. So it's 0 miles. It's yellow, of course, 18 miles per gallon. You get the Hemi on that. And, you know, it gives you all the options. It looks like it's fairly well decked out, being a Rebel. Actually, we could even probably go through some of the photos on this rig. Let's take a look. Look at that. Pretty nice looking unit. Absolutely. See? It's a pretty truck. Big boots, lift cut, leather interior. Yeah, you got pretty much all the features you want in that thing. But how much? That was an expensive truck. Now, granted, we all know that people are getting gouged. You know, the truck prices were marked up 30 or 40, 50%, you know, over 4 years. But now we're starting to see some of those numbers drop back down. I mean, unfortunately, inflation's always going to take a toll, and you'll never be able to get back to where we were. I don't think that's going to happen. It'll take some extreme crash. But if we can get close to where we were, we got to consider, you know, the standard inflation rate, you know, that's maybe 3-4% year over year. And where does that take us? Well, we've got to try to meet that in the middle. We should always be trying to target invoice pricing too, and not sticker. So this one says a sticker at $79,650. Sticker, right? MSRP. So you don't want to pay MSRP. What do you want to pay? Well, it says price went down by $10,000 right there. 10 grand it went down. But, okay, if you want to pay how much per month? That's on, let's say 0 down, and you have a decent credit score, and you take it all over, let's say 5 years. Well, let's just say you put $10,000 down, because most people, you got some money or a bit of a trade. So now you're basically looking at $1,050. So you're about $1 grand, a brand new 5.7 Rebel lifted up 4x. I mean, hey, it's the rig special, right? It's a great looking unit, but you're able to get a great deal. Let's just back this one out and see right there, $59,000. So it's already, they said marked down 10 grand, which would have been 69, but they're actually listing it at 59. So $20,000 off sticker. That's huge. That's 25% off, folks. 25% off. So that's a pretty solid deal. Here's another one. Another pretty big discount. 23 1500 Ram Tradesman Crew. This one's a little prettier. You get the nicer wheels on it. Look, you go from 49,000, 48 and change down to 32. Let's take a look. This is a beauty. You know, let's take a look at this. Now you can see, because it's the classic and, you know, the older body style, it looks older. But if you need a brand new truck to get to work, and you need a brand new truck just to do all your truck duties, this will get you done. 4x4, you got the alloys. You know what? Very basic, lots of plastic. The older design, you'll notice you don't get the big screens. So if you're one that likes all electronics, you're going to have to step up your game a little bit. But if you just need a basic truck, and we talk about this all the time. You know, my old Ram, my 2003 Ram, I literally have, I think it's a tape deck or a CD player in there. It's good enough for me. I don't even really listen to the radio much. But, you know, you have your other systems too. You can get those plug-ins and update your deck anyway for a small amount of money. So this is a great deal here. Crew cab 4-wheel drive. So you get the basics, right? You got the extra space. You get the 4-wheel drive. And this does give the V6. But let's take a look here. So the MSRP was $48,000 and change. And, of course, they say they went down by $10,600 right there. But when in actuality, we see they went down a little bit more than that. So yeah, there's some great deals in that little unit. Now maybe you want something that looks a little newer. So here's a 23, you've got to knock them down. I mean, we're dealing with 23s, folks. There's no way you should be paying any more than 20-25% off of the core sticker. I mean, again, we're targeting between sticker price and down below around invoice. Realistically, at invoice, maybe even lower for a vehicle that's already 2 years old. Because otherwise, what you're doing is you're landing yourself a vehicle that's maybe going on 2, possibly 3 years old, And then you've got tires that are starting a flat spot. You've got batteries that only have a couple years left in them before you've got to replace that, you know, a dry cell battery that they cost a lot of money, $500-600 for a new battery. You've got issues with, you know, paint fading. The oil hasn't probably been changed, and we know that you're supposed to change it once a year or every, you know, X amount of thousands of kilometers or miles. And if it hasn't been changed, it probably needs to be looked at too. So there's a lot of things to consider, but if you can get the price down, and 25-30% is my target for anything that's already like a 23, 22 and older, definitely, as per the question that I just got here from Bradley Lawless. Again, as I repeat, thanks Bradley for your comment or your question right there, asking about, you know, where you can get some of these cheap deals right there. Check out Car Gurus, go on there, do your search, filter it in to your area, the type of truck. You've got to go with the vehicle, the make, model, and all of that, and you guarantee you're going to find some smoking deals. So did you find anything interesting? Make sure you spend some time this weekend. Go shop around. I guarantee you're going to find something that you may want to buy, and it's probably going to be at a solid price. And of course, as always, on that news story right there, you're going to check another version of Crusty Car News, and of course, GM. What's going on? They can't even build a truck these days without something blowing apart, from my own personal experience. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.